After a heavy snowstorm, Emily and her father Jack stepped outside their forest cabin and stopped cold. Just beyond their porch were massive bear tracks, fresh and deep in the snow. But something was strange. The prints weren't leading away. They circled the cabin twice, then wandered back into the woods. Jack noticed something else. The bear had been limping. Curiosity quickly turned into unease. Emily insisted they follow. "Something's not right," she whispered. What they discovered deep in the forest wasn't just shocking, it would forever change how they viewed the wild. A silent cry had been left in the snow, and answering it would test their courage, compassion, and beliefs. At the end of those tracks was more than just a wounded animal. It was the beginning of a bond that defied nature, and a story they'd carry for the rest of their lives. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered: bent trees, broken branches, and a silence so thick it seemed to swallow sound. Emily zipped up her coat and stepped onto the porch, her boots crunching lightly on the fresh blanket of snow. The forest lay before her, glittering under a pale winter sun. Her father, Jack, came out behind her, coffee in hand. "Everything looks intact," he said, scanning the treeline. "Roof's fine. Satellites still up." But Emily wasn't listening. Her gaze was fixed on the snow-covered ground, where a single set of paw prints began just 10 feet from their steps. "Dad," she said slowly, "come look at this." Jack knelt beside the tracks. They were unmistakable, large, wide, and heavy. A bear. But not just that. There was something else. "Do you see that?" he muttered, pointing. "The right paw drags. These aren't steady steps. It's limping." Emily followed the tracks with her eyes. They didn't just pass by. The prints looped around the side of the cabin, and came back again. "Why would it circle?" she asked. Jack stood, concern darkening his brow. Could be disoriented. Could be injured. Or, looking for something. Emily didn't say it aloud, but she thought it, or someone. Their cabin was secluded, hours from the nearest ranger post, surrounded by miles of dense forest. Wild animals were common, but rarely this close. And never this deliberate. Jack hesitated. "We should probably let the rangers know." "But what if it's hurt?" Emily asked. "What if it needs help?" Jack looked at her. "It's a wild bear, Em. Not a stray dog." Still, she walked to the edge of the trees where the prints vanished into shadow. "I just want to follow the tracks. Just a little." He sighed. Moments later, father and daughter stepped into the forest, leaving behind the safety of their home, and entering a story they never imagined they'd be part of. The forest greeted them with a hush. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that presses against your chest like a held breath. The trees were still dusted with snow, bending gently under the weight, and the wind had died down, leaving behind an eerie quiet. Emily kept her eyes on the tracks. They were clear, crisp, and unsettlingly slow. The bear had stopped several times, its paws creating wider impressions in the snow, almost like it had collapsed or hesitated. Jack followed close behind, more alert now. He clutched the small emergency kit slung over his shoulder, just in case. "How long ago do you think this was?" Emily whispered. "Last night. Maybe even early morning," Jack replied. "Still fresh. The snow hasn't covered them." They pushed deeper into the woods. The air grew colder, and the trees pressed in tighter. The bear's path meandered, toward the river, then turned uphill. Each step told a silent story, pain, confusion, perhaps desperation. Then something shifted. Emily stopped. A tuft of fur caught on a low-hanging branch. "Dad, look." She reached out and gently pulled it free. Coarse, brown, bear fur, matted with a spot of dried blood. Jack examined it with quiet concern. Injured. Likely not just a limp, maybe caught in a trap, or mauled by another animal. "Should we really keep going?" Emily asked. Jack hesitated. "If it's suffering, we should at least know what we're dealing with." They walked on. Suddenly, a crow burst from a tree above them, flapping wildly, its call sharp and jarring in the silence. Emily jumped, her heart skipping. "I hate when they do that," she muttered, forcing a nervous smile. Jack didn't laugh. He was staring ahead. The trees opened slightly into a clearing. At the center was something strange, a small snow-covered dip in the earth, like a den, but it wasn't natural. It looked like it had been clawed out in desperation. And there, lying barely visible inside it, was movement. The bear. Or rather, the cub. Emily stepped closer, slowly, almost unbelieving. It wasn't a giant grizzly or even a fully grown black bear. What lay curled inside the hollow was a bear cub, barely larger than a retriever. Its fur was dirty, matted. One paw was swollen and red. Its eyes were open, barely blinking, watching them. Not fearful, just tired. "Oh my God," Emily breathed. "It's just a baby." Jack knelt slowly. "Looks like he's been alone a while." The cub didn't growl. Didn't move. Just stared. Jack exhaled. He must have lost his mother in the storm. Emily stepped forward. Her boots crunched softly. And then something impossible happened. The cub made a sound. Not a growl, not a whimper, but something between. It wasn't just noise. It was vocal. Intentional. Like it was trying to say something. Jack froze. Emily's eyes widened. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The cub made the sound again, short, breathy, like a broken word trying to form. Not a wild cry. A call. For help. The bear cub didn't move, yet its eyes held a strange awareness. Emily stood motionless, captivated. She'd seen injured animals before, once even nursed a wounded fox, but this was different. This cub wasn't just surviving. It was trying to communicate. Again, the sound came. A soft, muffled exhale, followed by a rumble deep in its throat, not aggressive, not defensive, almost questioning. Jack slowly crouched beside Emily. "He's not scared of us," he said. "That's not normal." Emily nodded. "It's like he's been around humans before." The cub's paw twitched. He winced, then whimpered again. His gaze didn't leave them. Emily whispered, "I think he's calling out." Jack reached slowly into the emergency kit, pulling out a protein bar and gently unwrapping it. He extended it low to the ground, resting it on a flat stone and backing away. The cub didn't rush. He waited, eyes flicking between the bar and them. Then, with clear effort, he shifted his weight forward and dragged himself closer. His limp was pronounced, his breathing labored, but he reached the bar, sniffed it, then took a bite, chewing carefully, as though unfamiliar with human food but too hungry to care. Emily's heart broke watching him. "We can't just leave him here," she said. Jack sighed. "We shouldn't even be this close." "But you saw how he looked at us. Like he knew we could help." Jack didn't argue. He didn't need to. The cub had made a third sound now, a long low murmur that almost resembled a word. Not a human word, not clearly, but something shaped, intentional. The kind of vocalization learned by imitation. Emily's voice trembled. "Dad, what if someone taught him?" Jack looked at her, startled. It was a wild thought. Impossible. Yet the sound was undeniable. There was a rhythm, a pattern. The cub finished the bar and collapsed back down, exhausted. Emily dropped to her knees beside him, carefully. "We have to take him home." Jack hesitated only a second more, then said, "Help me wrap his paw." Back at the cabin, the cub lay on a thick wool blanket near the fireplace. Jack had cleaned the wound and wrapped it in gauze. Emily made a small bowl of water and a dish with mashed up oats and honey. He ate slowly, watching them the whole time. Then later that evening, as the wind whispered against the windows and the forest faded into night, the cub made the sound again. But this time, it sounded almost like a name. Emily froze. Did you hear that?" she whispered. Jack turned, wide-eyed. The cub looked at her. He blinked slowly. Jack knelt. That's not coincidence." Emily's voice cracked. "That's my name." By morning, the snow had crusted over the world outside in a perfect hush. But inside the cabin, a storm of questions brewed quietly between father and daughter. The bear cub was curled beside the stove, his eyes following every move Emily made. She whispered soft words, not expecting him to understand, and yet every so often, the cub responded with gentle echo-like sounds. Tones that mimicked her rhythm, her syllables. Jack paced. "A wild cub doesn't do this. He shouldn't even be comfortable around us." Emily gently scratched behind the cub's ear. I think he was raised by people. Before. Jack hesitated. If that's true, someone taught him to speak. Or tried to. Emily looked up. Then we need to find out who. Jack exhaled slowly. And why? After breakfast, they contacted the local ranger station by radio. Static crackled, then came the voice of Ranger Halliday, gruff, but dependable. You found a what? A bear cub, Jack replied. About 6 months old. Limping, underfed, and he glanced at Emily, vocal. Vocal how? Jack paused. He imitates sounds. Human sounds. Silence on the other end. Then, you should come in. Later that afternoon, Jack and Emily drove to the ranger station while the cub remained safely in the cabin, watched over by their neighbor, an old woman who'd once raised orphaned lynx kits. Halliday pulled out a folder when they arrived. We've had 2 reports this year, he said, spreading out photos. This one, 2 hikers saw a bear cub eating out of a backpack. Said he didn't run. Just looked at them, then made this grunting sound. Sounded like a name. Emily leaned in. What name? Halliday looked at her. They both swore it sounded like Ben. He flipped to another photo, blurry, taken near an old logging road. This one's more important. Security camera from a rehab facility up north. Shut down months ago for, let's say, questionable practices. Jack's voice grew hard. What kind of facility? Unofficial wildlife training and behavioral lab. Privately funded. Said they were teaching cubs for controlled forest interaction. Claimed it was ethical. And it wasn't, Emily said flatly. Halliday shook his head. They abandoned the project. 1 cub went missing when they closed. He looked up. They said he was the most advanced. Responded to tone, rhythm, even simple names. Emily's heart dropped. That's him, she whispered. Back at the cabin, the cub greeted them by slowly rising to his feet, unsteady but trying. When he saw Emily, he murmured again, M. Her eyes filled with tears. Jack sat on the edge of the sofa. We have 2 choices, he said softly. Take him to the State Wildlife Center. Or. Emily shook her head. They'll cage him. He doesn't need tests. He needs a home. Jack didn't argue. Not this time. The cub nuzzled her arm. Emily whispered, What happened to you out there? He only blinked, and gave a small, sorrowful sound. It wasn't just survival they saw in his eyes now. It was memory. Loss. Recognition. He wasn't just an animal. He was a story someone tried to erase. And Emily? She was becoming part of it. That night, the wind howled again, louder this time, primal and angry. Emily stood by the window, arms folded, eyes scanning the darkened tree line beyond the porch. Inside, the cub paced restlessly, grumbling low sounds that almost formed words. Jack came into the room, shotgun in hand. The rangers called. Someone's been spotted heading this way. 2 men. One of them used to work at that shutdown facility. Emily turned. They're coming for him, aren't they? Jack nodded grimly. They won't ask. They'll just take him. The cub whimpered and pressed himself against Emily's leg, as if sensing something had changed. No, she whispered, kneeling to face him. We won't let them take you again. The men arrived just after midnight. Their truck headlights pierced the snow. Jack stepped onto the porch, blocking their path. Emily stayed inside with the cub, watching every movement. Evening, said the taller man, wearing a black winter coat. We heard about a young bear. Came to retrieve him. This bear's under our care now, Jack replied calmly. You'll need proper documentation. The man smiled. We don't need anything. He was our property. Legally obtained during a research grant. Emily opened the door slightly. He's not property. He's a living creature. You abandoned him in the wild. The second man stepped forward. Miss, with all due respect, this isn't a debate. The bear has been genetically coded. He was part of an imprinting experiment. He's dangerous if not handled properly. Emily stood her ground. He speaks. He remembers. He feels. That's what scares you. Inside the cabin, the cub growled, a deep defensive sound. Not aggression. Warning. Jack raised his voice. You're not taking him. The taller man sighed. We can involve law enforcement. Do it, Jack said. Let's see how a court reacts to you losing an intelligent animal in the woods and then showing up unannounced to reclaim it. There was a long, tense silence. Then, tires crunching. Headlights. A second truck pulled up beside them. Ranger Halliday stepped out. I figured they might not listen, he said, walking up beside Jack. Good thing we keep backup records on hand. He held a manila folder in his gloved hands. According to the shutdown logs, this cub was never chipped. You have no legal claim to him anymore. He's considered part of the ecosystem now. The men argued, but Halliday was immovable. You want to argue about it? Call the Wildlife Bureau in the morning. But tonight, you're trespassing. Defeated and seething, the two researchers climbed back into their vehicle and drove off into the darkness. Inside, the cub sat silently, his head tilted. Emily crouched and held out her arms. You're safe, she whispered. He ambled forward and pressed his head against her chest. Not wild, not broken. Just, home. Jack knelt beside her and stroked the bear's back gently. We stood up, he said quietly. Emily nodded, eyes misty. And he knew we would. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted in quiet layers, revealing damp earth, green shoots, and forgotten paths once buried in white. The forest breathed again, and so did the hearts inside the little cabin. The cub had grown stronger, taller, smarter, and louder. Every morning began with him talking, a series of deep grumbling sounds that mimicked tone and pattern. Not random. Not instinct. It was language, in its rawest form. Emily would laugh when he imitated her father's voice, a low rumble and short bark that echoed Jack's stern tone. Jack pretended to be annoyed, but couldn't hide his pride. Ranger Halliday visited often now, bringing recording equipment and colleagues. They'd sit in silence for hours, watching the cub interact. He responded to certain words. Showed memory recall. Emotions. Humor. This isn't just mimicry, Halliday said one day, voice trembling. This is the beginning of something bigger. One researcher suggested sending the cub to a university lab for observation. Emily's answer was simple. He doesn't belong in a cage. He belongs in this forest. They didn't argue again. But as months passed, the cub began spending more time at the edge of the trees. His calls grew softer. His responses slower. One morning, Emily woke to find the cabin empty. Panic gripped her. She ran outside, and found Jack already standing on the porch, pointing quietly. There in the distance, the cub sat at the edge of the woods. His nose lifted to the wind. His body still. And behind him, a silhouette. A wild bear, full-grown. Watching. The cub turned back once. Held Emily's gaze. And then with slow, careful steps, he crossed into the forest. The larger bear didn't run. She waited, then walked beside him as they disappeared into the trees. Days passed. Then weeks. Emily still left fruit near the porch. Some mornings it was gone. Sometimes, not. But the silence didn't hurt. It comforted her now. He's where he belongs, Jack said gently. Yes, Emily whispered. But he changed us. Forever. 1 year later, a local wildlife documentary aired across the region. Its final segment? A blurry night vision clip from a ranger trail cam, capturing two bears crossing a frozen stream. One large. One smaller. The smaller one stopped. Looked straight at the camera. Then made a low, human-like grunt, unmistakable in rhythm. Almost like a word. Then vanished into the wild again. Emily watched it replay a dozen times. She smiled. He remembers. Sometimes the wild comes to us, not to be tamed, but to remind us who we are. This story isn't about a bear being saved. It's about humans being awakened. To connection. To instinct. And to a voice in the forest that still echoes, if you just listen.